After weeks of suspense and sneak peeks on social media, Titleist have finally released their TSi drivers. Now I've got the TSi2 here, and today I'm going to compare it against the TS2 and the Titleist 915 and see how the performance has changed. So visually I think it's safe to say nothing drastic has changed. It's still very much when you pick up any of these three you know it's a Titleist driver, and I really like that. I really like the simple, kind of clean, elegant and classic look. But I think you can see there has been upgrades made through each, and one is definitely the gloss finish. On the 915 you can really see it's just not as bright. It's a lot duller and there's a bit more of a kind of sparkle to it. With the current models you can see it's a much more of a pure black gloss finish. I do just think this looks nicer. Now it's quite interesting to know that each model has kind of been simplified as the years gone, so although we're getting different technology and more upgrades in technology, we're actually getting more simplified shapings. We've lost things like the active record channel, and really when we come to the TSi2, it does look quite futuristic in styling. Definitely very kind of space vibes. I guess you're getting that from the materials as well. But I do think this looks great, and it definitely is the best of the three. I think another big upgrade is definitely the face texture. I really love how the face is brought out with the extra detail in this year. You can see before how the faces were always quite plain on the Titleist driver, which isn't a bad thing. I do like the simplicity, but it does mean when it's sat down behind the golf ball, you don't really have that definition between the top of the club and the face. So I think having these extra textures this year has really made a big difference visually in terms of kind of confidence and alignment. I can't resist starting with the TSi2. I mean, look at it. That was a nice strike. I think one thing I've definitely picked up between this and the TS2 is this does feel a little bit more compact, and like I can move it faster in my swing. Sometimes the TS2 felt a little bit heavy in certain positions because of the bigger club head, but that could also be down to a difference in shaft as well, so that is something to keep in mind. Okay, so a quick look at the data on the first shot. Club speed definitely standing out to me is up at over 95, which is quicker than what I typically am at with a Titleist driver, and my carry distance was up at 242, which is definitely a very big carry for me. Okay, so I would say that was a better strike, but my club head speed was actually slightly down a little bit, but I was still carrying that in the 230s, so pretty good distance. One thing I was really impressed with in my fitting in particular was kind of the consistency of the shot shape and the flight. Even if I felt like I'd hit the shot maybe a little bit necky, which is a bad shot, the spin was very stable. It's almost like the golf ball just landed in the same place as my good shot. I was like, how is that even possible? I think we are still seeing that in the results here, like my shot shape, my flight, they're all very consistent. So I've hit 6 shots there, and you can see the grouping and the ball flight is very similar, all on apart from one, which I had hit a massive block. But the other 5 are almost kind of identical in shot shape, height. So then if we move across to the numbers, distance was doing really well. So average carry at 233, which is definitely a long way for me. And I picked up a bit of club head speed from what I think I would expect with the TS2 up at 94 miles an hour. But let's go back and hit the other two and see exactly how these numbers compare. Okay, TS2 time now. You can definitely notice the difference straight away with the club face. Without the engraving, it just doesn't look like there's as much depth, and you don't feel like you can see the club face as well. Definitely a little bit higher ball fly than what I had with the TSi, and distance is a little bit down on my first shot, 233, but still a good carry. So straight away, just from those 2 shots, I've noticed a big drop in club head speed. So my average before was up at 94. With them, I'm not even sure it was making 90. So there's definitely a big difference in terms of how I can move it through the air. I think some of that is definitely down to the shaft. This is a bit heavier than what I've been fitting for this year. But also the club head just does feel easier to move. And that is kind of the story in the new TSi. There definitely has been a lot of aerodynamic changes and a bit of change to the shaping to help you feel like you can move the club head faster. So I caught that one a little bit heely, and instantly you can can see the kind of increase in spin and the drop off in distance down to 213. Now we just didn't see that shot with the TSi. Even if I caught that one a bit off the heel, the kind of distance numbers and the spin was really stable, and I think that is the most impressive thing I've noticed with this driver throughout my testing. Right, that's 6 shots hit, so let's take a quick look at the numbers. So looking at the comparison, the first big thing that stands up to me is the club head speed, and I've lost 2 miles an hour with the TS2. At the start it was a bit worse than this, but I did speed up as I went along, so I've got that up to 92 miles an hour, but compared to 94 with the TSi, I definitely lost a bit of speed there. And that's definitely showed in the distance. My average carry here was 223 compared to 233 with the TSi2. And these were both with kind of very similar spin averages. I was at 2.5 with the TSi2 and 2.1 with the TS2. Now, I wouldn't say I hit all the shots perfect. Definitely with both, I hit a bit of a block for one of the shots, which was not what I was aiming to do, but quite good for consistency of data. So there was a kind of wide variety of different strikes in there, which is really important to see. And we definitely did see the biggest drop in the TS2 with kind of best to worst shots. So my front to back dispersion not being as good. Another thing that was interesting was that the TSi2 was actually flying a bit higher. I think that is probably because I've just got a slightly softer shaft in this, so it's going to just make it launch a bit higher compared to the heavier shaft that's in the TS2. Anyway, let's have a go at hitting the 915 D2 now. I think if you look back in time, this is one of those drivers that I'm really nostalgic about. It definitely was my favourite club at the time, and I had it in my bag for like 5 years. So it was a driver I'm very fond of, and I think you always think back and think you hit it better than you did once it's gone out of the bag, but it will be really interesting to see how it compares against the new models. Wow, this really looks so old compared to the other ones now, and the club head definitely looks a bit more compact. I don't know if that's just a visual thing with the kind of more plain face and stuff like that, but it definitely does look a bit smaller behind the ball. Now I pushed that a little bit, but I feel like I struck it well and it's only carried 222, so definitely a drop off in distance already. And it's probably worth noting, like, I've hit so many golf balls with this driver that the face would definitely be worn like past legality, so it's going to be quicker off the face than it should have been when it was first bought. So in theory it's going to go further than it actually would have done at time of kind of release. Now it's really interesting that both of those shots are finished right of the target line, and I would say if I look back to when I used this driver, I definitely had more of a right favoured miss than with the newer models, which is definitely more left favoured. Now I don't know if necessarily that's either a good or a bad thing. It's just definitely something that I noticed is different between the two. Obviously I've missed them all left of targets and say that's more right biased. Seriously, I hit this thing so straight. It's funny how you just get comfortable with certain clubs, isn't it? Obviously I used that for like 4 or 5 seasons and it still felt really good going back to it. In fact, I would say I've probably struck those 6 the most consistently out of all the testing, but it's still my lowest recorded average distance, so only just at 221 yards, but I definitely did strike these better than I did with the TS2, so that's something to take into consideration. And my club head was pretty similar. It was actually bang smack in the middle of the two, so it was up from the TS2 at 93, but still just under the TS2i. I think this is definitely down to the kind of shaping and the size of the club head. The 915 definitely does look the smallest, especially compared to the TS2, but then when we move to the TS2i, you can definitely see there's a change in the kind of depth of the club head, especially at the back. It looks a lot more elongated and like it can move through the air quicker, so it's definitely interesting to see the kind of difference in club head speed we've got related to the different shape of each driver. Now the spin was also a lot higher with this, so averaging 3,600. This probably would be what I expect due to the fact it's a bit worn. I've also got a bit of a lighter shaft in this, so it's not really surprising, but definitely not as consistent a spin as the other two. In terms of height, this was actually flying the lowest as well, so at just under 100 feet, so compared to 102 with the TS2 and 110 with the TSi2. I think generally for most club golfers, seeing a higher fly is going to give you more hang time and more distance, so it's definitely something that for most people is going to help and going to give you that extra carry. Now obviously I've only collected a small sample of data inside here for you to see today, but I have been outside with all three, hit 20 balls on the GC2 with the HMT, and it's really interesting to see just how close the data was. I mean, the TS2i was going 235 outside, the TS2 was going 228, and the 915 was going 221, so all very consistent with what we've seen inside. I think the TS2 went a little bit further outside, probably just because I had a bigger sample and I struck it a little bit more consistent than I did today. But really I saw the same picture with a bigger sample, which is really good to know. So if you're someone who's looking to invest in a new driver and you want more distance, I think Titleist can definitely back up the claims they're making. These drivers are definitely quicker, the ball just feels like it comes off the face faster, and I'm seeing like 10 yards of yardage gain compared to the TS2, which is obviously very impressive. But I think really for me, the thing that I like the most is the spin stability. Especially on those kind of heel strikes, the ball almost just finishes where you would expect it to if you'd hit it out the middle, and you're really not getting that kind of high spinny shot that's disappearing up into the air. I think for most club golfers, bringing down that spin on your bad shot is really going to give you almost more benefits than that extra 10 yards. Right, that's all for today. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below. I can't wait to do some more testing with this driver and get it out on the golf course. Make sure you keep your eye out for more driver head-to-heads coming up to find out if the Titleist TSi2 is going to make it into my bag for the 2021 season. And if you're after more golf content, head over to the NCG social media channels for more.